The Repast Podcast may include detailed discussions about death, the human body after death, and the medical process that may be sensitive or disturbing to some listeners and viewers. Our goal is to educate and inform with respect and care. We encourage listener and viewer discretion, especially for younger audiences or those who may find these topics emotionally challenging. Welcome back to the Repast Podcast. In part 1, we shared what it was like growing up around the funeral home and in the funeral business, the family legacy, the early memories, and the meaning behind the work we do. In this episode, we pick up the conversation and take you deeper into the day-to-day, the stories, the surprises, and the heart that drives it all. Let's get into part 2. So when we go into our next topic of what's it like to work in this business, a lot of people always ask that question. They always wonder, what's it like to work as a funeral director? What's it like to be around death? What is it like? What may surprise you, or what has surprised you about working in the funeral industry?
I would say being around it my whole life, it's surprising that you still see new things. Like you would think if you'd been around something as long as we have, that you've pretty much seen it all. But whenever you think you've seen it all, something new comes up. So I think that's the one piece is the situations we've seen, whether it's families that are fighting and have to go to probate court and we have to hold their loved one for weeks and weeks on end until the court determines who is going to be the rightful next of kin to do the disposition. Like I said, whenever you think you've seen it all, something happens new that's unique and we haven't seen before.
Right. Yeah. Mom, you've been around a lot longer and been in the business, so you've seen a lot more than anybody. Yeah. But I know you got some surprising stories, but
there's a whole lot of things that happened in the funeral home. Years ago, what happened to my dad, and this is kind of a little gross story, but I remember one night we were at home waiting to go to a party, and it was taking him so long to get there. And he finally called, and he had said that what happened one night is that somebody jumped inside of a casket with a woman. Jumped inside of the casket. I think they call it necrophilia. Necrophilia, that's what they call it. And I mean, that's something we had never experienced, and hopefully I'll never experience that again. But we can see some strange things in the funeral home.
Yeah, I think working in the care center, I see a lot that obviously still surprises me. Every day there's something new, it seems like. But working in the inner city, and we take care of a lot of Wayne County medical examiner cases, so we see a lot of that. I tell people all the time, I don't watch the news. When I go to work, it is the news. Like whatever, I see it when I get to work. So I'm just surprised to see. It was a little bit ago, but I was surprised to see so many women who had died from homicide. Like you see that so much. And it was a time where many of the younger women who we were caring for at that time had died from homicide. So that was like super shocking. Like, wow, you would assume that you would not see that, as often as we see it. So that's still, to me, I'm still shocked by certain things.
And then too with that is how the fentanyl overdose hit the Black community.
Yes.
I mean, that was one thing where, overdosing was something that didn't affect us. That just didn't happen in our community. Yeah. But the potency of that fentanyl and people not knowing that whatever they're smoking or the drugs that they're doing of their choice, they think it's recreational, but it's laced with fentanyl, and it easily can take you out. Because we've seen people from kids, 5-year-olds, that had got a hold of some kind of fentanyl at the house and died just from touching it and got into their system, all the way up to 80-year-old men. Yeah. And they did a toxicology and found they had fentanyl in their system. So,
and if you remember, not long ago, we had a window of time where it was like a back-to-back thing. Like there were so many cases that we got, by death of fentanyl. So,
and you snatched that idea right out of my head. That's what I was, being around the funeral industry my whole life. I've never seen anything like this before, and even, I don't know how it was during, the crack epidemic and that kind of thing. If Mom, if you've seen,
If you remember back then, seeing a lot of death certificates that said overdose.
It wasn't like it is now.
Right, because now it's crazy because we can almost determine, we're almost detectives, where we can determine when a bad batch of drugs has entered into the city of Detroit and is getting distributed around. Because when it's getting around to the city and it's being passed around, all of a sudden we see all these death certificates that are pending out of Wayne County. Everything is pending. And then once those results come back, the toxicology comes back, almost everything, fentanyl overdose. And it's insane how that has changed, and it's affecting everybody, not just one particular community.
And that's one thing, going back to the death certificates, when people don't realize if it is a medical examiner case and it says pending, it means they have not completed the results of the autopsy, waiting on toxicology results. So the cause of death has not been ruled, which we can't control. We have to wait on the medical examiner. So sometimes people are waiting for months to get a final death certificate with a cause of death because the toxicology results haven't come back. So that's one thing to remember too with death certificates, is if the cause of death has not been ruled by the medical examiner, that's something that the funeral home is waiting on, and it's out of our hands.
And with this being Wayne County, and it's one of the highly most populated counties, or more than likely in the Midwest, there's such a large amount of people in Wayne County alone that the Wayne County medical examiner has to handle the entire county. You would think it would go a little bit quicker, move a little bit faster, but sometimes, especially as a grieving family, you don't realize they're not just handling the city of Detroit. This is the entire county. This is the whole metro area that's in the county, in Wayne County, and they have to determine cases on every.
That's one thing that's new, that's not new but old, but things like when a family comes in, you're making arrangements and the family is upset and they're taking out their anger on you. And, whether they're being verbally nasty or, physically, they're just being a little disrespectful towards you, but you've got to be willing to work through that and almost not take it personal and kind of ignore what they're doing and still deal with the business at hand. So I've had families that, would call back the next day and apologize, or when they leave, their family members call back and apologize for them. But that's just a part of the business. So you got to have thick skin, especially when you're making those arrangements with the family, because you never know what type of emotional situation they're going to be in.
But 9 times out of 10, when you're professional with them, you're kind with them, you don't turn around and take that anger that they're throwing at you, throwing it back to them. 9 times out of 10, they're going to calm right down. They calm right on down. You can have them almost eating out of your hands by the time the end of the arrangements.
Right. And that leads me to, it also as part of the next question of how it is being a funeral director, a mortician, how does that enrich you? What does that do for you? Because it's in those situations when you deal with a family that's in that type of emotional turmoil and they're taking it out on you. At that same time, when that family does call back and say, you know what, I'm sorry. We were going through a rough time. We've been going through it. This was either unexpected or it's just very emotional. We didn't mean to take that out on you, and it as well as that, when the family gets up and says, you made this so easy, when they apologize for those natural human emotions that they're going through, that just, it enriches you and it enriches me, I would say, that really makes me feel that, that this is what I'm doing. I'm helping them and I'm guiding them through this with compassion and care, to the point where even through their emotions, they're calling back and they're saying, you know what, I'm sorry.
Yeah, more times than not. When they leave after they're making the arrangements conference, they like, I didn't know it was going to be this easy. You made this so easy on us, and we appreciate that. Just, and then also when they come in to see their loved one, thanks to some people in our care team, and they come in and they view their loved one and they're like, oh, they're just so beautiful. It makes this whole ordeal so much easier. I mean, I can accept it a little bit more because look how beautiful she looks or he looks. And thanks to our care team, we hear that a lot.
When you get those stories of, that's mama looks like she's sleeping. Grandma looks like she's taking a nap. That's what that natural closure, and that's where that comes from, where you're able to look at your grandmother and see, that's my grandmother, she's just taking a nap.
And it's so gratifying when you come in, especially because I'm able to work both sides. So when I'm in the arrangement conference and they're asking certain questions about being able to view their loved one, and they say, well, she lost a lot of weight. I don't know. We may have to have a closed casket. Maybe the family will just view and then we'll close it, And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, no, we're not. No, we're going to make sure that you see your loved one. And so when they get in, for their first viewing and they're able to see their loved one and they're like, oh my goodness, how did you do this? Like, she's beautiful. That moment, it makes everything worth it. It makes everything worth it because you came in, thinking that you were never going to have that closure, or that, you were not going to be able to allow your family and friends to see your loved one, and they're able to. So the closed casket is like, when I hear that, I'm like, oh no. I'll go with your flow, but we're going to make sure that you view. Yeah.
So when families lose a loved one and they make that, what we call the first call, the death call to the funeral home, walk us through what happens in that process.
So typically when the family calls in with a first call, they're speaking with the receptionist, and they're collecting all that vital information about, where the deceased is, and all the details that we need so that we can start the process of dispatching our removal team to go out to the place of passing, whether it's, their home, whether it's the hospital, or if their loved one is at the medical examiner's office. They're getting that information so that we can properly dispatch our team to go out and make the removal. The family does have to sign a release to give us permission to start that process. So typically they're coming into the funeral home to sign that release, but with our technology, we're able to send a release to the family to make it more convenient for them as well. And so we dispatch our removal team to go out and bring the deceased into our care. From there, they enter into our care center, and the family decides when they call in for that first call whether they want to have a funeral service, or if they're undecided, which many times the family is undecided, they don't know what they want to do. So
sometimes, I don't know if I'm offended, but they think we're asking too many questions at that time when the call comes in. What do you mean? Am I going to be having a funeral with a casket, with the viewing? One thing, the law requires you get permission to embalm. To embalm, you have to have verbal and written permission to embalm. So you have to ask them. You have to ask these questions that aren't really comfortable even for us. Yeah, it's not comfortable to ask. Well, do you want your loved one embalmed? People don't even want to hear that word embalmed.
And you know what? When I'm in the position where I have to ask that question, I'll just say, "Are you going to have a viewing for your loved one?" And then that way, I better understand whether. Or a viewing or a funeral. And that way I know that we have to embalm. So I'll just say that, and then, okay, so we do have your permission to embalm. Right. And that it seems to lighten up the question just a little bit. But it all depends on their temperament, because many times the family calls, and during that first call, they can't even talk a lot of the times. They can't even get out what they want you to do. They just want you to come out. Right. And so, you really do have to gauge it. And that's why I really applaud our receptionists, because they're the first point of contact many times for the families. And so it's so important to be patient and very calm, because they're on the other end of that phone, and their minds are everywhere. They don't know what to do. They're looking for some type of guidance. I
think that's why it's important too that a funeral home has refrigeration.
Very important.
Because so often people don't know what they want. So they don't have to incur that extra cost of having their loved one embalmed if they're never going to do a viewing.
Right.
So that it's important to have refrigeration on the funeral home side so you can preserve the body for days following until the family does decide.
And that's an important aspect too of actually us receiving the first call. A lot of times there's a lot of misinformation out there. I get the phone call all the time. Why haven't you picked up my loved one yet? And I have to tell the family, we don't have any information. Well, I told the hospital.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that misinformation gap of, well, I told the hospital this is the funeral home that I want. You still have to call the funeral home. You still have to give us information. You still have to sign a release giving us permission to pick up. And those are those little quirks of information that people don't understand. Maybe they haven't done it before. And sometimes it's misinformation with the hospital trying to help, but they're giving the wrong information out.
And that's why it's so important on our end to not assume that the family knows anything. We talk about this so much, during a course of 1 week when we encounter different people and different families. But many times that's the family's first time having any contact with the funeral home. They've never experienced it. So sometimes in our mind, you assume that they just know that you have to come in and do X, Y, and Z, but they have no idea. So the education of that, in a very subtle way, while you're still being empathetic and caring for them, you have to educate them on what's next.
Is it true that embalming is legally required to have a funeral?
It varies on the state. Most states are going to have a certain time period from the onset of death until when the body has to be disposed or buried or cremated, when you can do a public viewing. Our policy is if it's going to be a public viewing, yes, the body has to be embalmed. But like I said, it depends on the state if you're going by state law, but most funeral homes, if you're going to, unless it's a religious accommodation that you're making, if you're going to do a public viewing, then the body has to be embalmed.
And India, is it true that you can donate your body to science?
Yes, absolutely you can. Okay. People donate their bodies to science. They donate their organs to science. So yes, we see that quite often.
Mm-hmm. Gift of life is a big push in Michigan. Now I have a colleague that sits with me on the District 1 of Michigan Funeral Directors Association, and great guy. He has his own funeral home, and tough Army guy too. Ex-Army, ex-military, tough guy, big guy. Never seen him really get emotional. And we were talking about gift of life and donating organs and how that goes so far beyond and helps save a life too. And this guy broke down. He started talking about it. He said he was in the hospital with his daughter. Thank God she's okay now. And they have what's called your last walk when you do a gift of life. And the nurses line the hallways and they bring your loved one out of the room on the hospital bed to walk them to the area of the hospital where gift of life will take over. And everybody applauds. And he said it's such a beautiful scenario and such a beautiful scene to actually experience. And when this big Army guy started shedding tears and wiping his face, I said, whoa, but that's one of the things that people don't understand. When you donate your body to science or donate your organs, it's not a thankless give that you're giving. Yeah.
Now, it's also important to note that, because I've had families ask this also, if you donate your organs to Gift of Life, can you still have a funeral? And yes, you can. Even if you donate your organs to Gift of Life, you can still have a full service with a visitation. So I know families may sometimes be miseducated by that. And sometimes they may bypass, being an organ donor because they think that they cannot have a funeral.
Now, most times if you're donating the body to science, then that's when you won't be able to have. Now, there are some instances that, depending on the place, the school, the college that you're donating the body to, if the body is prepared according to their standards, then you possibly could still have the viewing and then the body is transported to them. But most times, if you're doing body donation, then you're going straight to that school and there's no. Or if you're going to donate the body to research, so they have ballistics tests. Well, they will do ballistic testing on a human body. So it's a form of body donation, but it's a ballistic test.
So what does that consist of, a ballistic test?
So whether it is how bullets or how fragments impact the body, or how a body trauma happens to a body. So wouldn't say a crash dummy, but
I'm okay. I'll pause it there. I'll let my imagination do the rest.
The efficiency of airbags.
Wow.
You don't want to know how they figured it out. Right?
Well, I think that kind of closes us out for today. So in our next episode, we'll be talking with how families can incorporate those special personalized touches that help them memorialize their loved one in their own unique way. So I'd like to thank my mom in India for joining us today on the Repast Podcast. And as we sign off, I would just like to remind everyone to please support this podcast. You can support us by liking, leaving a comment, and sharing it with your friends. Whether you're listening to it on a podcast or watching us on YouTube, like, share, leave comments. That's what boosts the podcast. That's what keeps us going. Until next time, we'll see you on the Repast Podcast.